Disclaimer.
Silver crosses $67 per ounce. Within 90 seconds, trading algorithms at 8 major banks simultaneously triggered emergency protocols, not because of the price itself, but because of what $67 means under a rule change most people have never heard of. For the next 72 hours, these banks have 3 options. Post $891 billion in cash collateral, begin forced liquidation of 421 million ounces they don't actually have, or trigger the first banking crisis of 2026 before Christmas even arrives. And the countdown has 48 hours left. Here's what you need to understand. This is not about silver going up because people want it. This is about a mathematical trap that was set 3 years ago, a tripwire buried in commodity exchange rules that nobody paid attention to, and 8 of the world's largest banks now caught in a position they mathematically cannot escape. The invisible tripwire sits at exactly $67.25 per ounce. Let me show you why that number matters, more than any other price point in financial markets right now. Back in March 2023, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, that's Comex, where silver futures trade, quietly implemented something called Rule 4.07b, Enhanced Margin Liquidation Protocol. You can find it buried in Section 4.07b, subsection 3 of their rulebook. The language reads like legal sedative, but here's what it actually says. When volatility-adjusted price movements exceed 285% from weighted average short position entry points for systemically important participants, 100% margin collateral is required within 72 business hours. Translation for normal humans? If major banks shorted silver at $22 to $25 per ounce between 2020 and 2023, and the price hits 3.85 times their entry point, they're forced to post full cash collateral or automatically liquidate their positions within 3 days. Why did Comex create this rule? Because they're still haunted by March 2020, when retail investors on Reddit and Wall Street Silver nearly broke the entire commodities exchange. They almost succeeded in forcing physical delivery that Comex couldn't fulfill. Regulators watched that near-death experience and decided they needed automatic circuit breakers to force early liquidation before positions become too big to unwind. The irony is almost poetic. The rule designed to prevent a squeeze now guarantees one because it forces all 8 trapped banks to buy at exactly the same time. Here's the math that created the $67 kill switch. The average bank short entry price was $22.40 per ounce, weighted from CFTC bank participation reports between 2020 and 2023. 285% above that entry point would be $86.24. But these banks didn't short silver with cash. They used margin leverage, averaging about 3.2 to 1. When you factor in that leverage, the effective trigger point drops dramatically. 22, 40 times, 3.85, divided by their 3.2 leverage ratio with a 2.5 regulatory buffer, gives you $67.25 per ounce. Silver hit, the tripwire crossed. Now let's talk about the 8 institutions currently trapped in this mathematical vice. According to the December 2025 CFTC Bank Participation Report, here's what we're looking at. JPMorgan Chase holds 97.3 million ounces short with losses at $67 of 4.35 billion. HSBC Holdings has 78.6 million ounces short, 3.51 billion in losses. Scotiabank sits at 62.1 million ounces, 2.77 billion underwater. BNP Paribas holds 51.4 million ounces, with 2.29 billion in losses. UBS Group has 44.8 million ounces short for 2 billion in losses. Deutsche Bank carries 39.2 million ounces, 1.75 billion underwater. Citigroup holds 28.7 million ounces, with 1.28 billion in red ink. And Goldman Sachs has 18.9 million ounces short with 843 million in losses. Add it together, and you get 421 million ounces of short positions with current losses of $18.79 billion. But that's just the surface damage. These short positions aren't isolated bets. They hedge much larger gold and silver derivative books. The total notional value of linked derivatives across these 8 banks, $891 billion. If the silver shorts fail, the cascade affects commodity index funds, pension inflation hedges, sovereign wealth fund commodity allocations, and mining company hedging contracts. This isn't just about silver, it's about interconnected financial plumbing that spans the global banking system. For 4 years, these banks have successfully contained silver through a pattern so consistent you could set your watch by it. Whenever silver threatened to break higher, especially approaching month-end or option expiry, banks would dump massive paper contracts, not physical silver, just promises to deliver silver to crash the price. It worked because they could create unlimited paper silver through futures contracts. They were shorting something they never intended to deliver, betting they could always roll positions forward and suppress the price indefinitely. Then something changed. In December 2025, physical demand overwhelmed paper suppression. The banks can't suppress what they can't deliver, and they just discovered that physical demand now exceeds their paper manipulation capacity. Which brings us to the 72-hour countdown and the impossible choice. And I need you to understand why none of them work. Option A, post $891 billion in cash collateral. This requires liquidating other assets to raise cash, treasury bonds, corporate debt, equity holdings. The problem is obvious. selling $891 billion in assets in 72 hours crashes those markets. It creates what's called a doom loop. Forced selling drops prices, which triggers margin calls elsewhere, which requires more forced selling. We saw this in March 2020 when the Treasury market froze and the Fed had to intervene with $2.3 trillion in emergency liquidity. That was for a fraction of the selling pressure we're talking about now. Option B, forced liquidation through buying 421 million ounces to close short positions. Here's where the math becomes impossible. Only 47.2 million ounces exist in Comex registered vaults as of December 18th. That's 11% of what they need. When demand is 9 times supply, historical squeezes show 8 to 15 times price multipliers. $67 times 8 equals 536 per ounce. 67 times 15 equals 1,005 per ounce. The realistic range for forced buying over 10 trading days, $380 to $720 per ounce. Option C, negotiate an emergency extension. This requires the CFTC to issue an emergency order suspending Rule 4.07b. But CFTC emergency orders require a 48-hour public comment period, which doesn't fit the 72-hour window. Even if they waive that requirement, the market impact is devastating. Suspending forced liquidation rules signals the market is broken, which triggers investor panic and a surge in physical buying. The CFTC has never suspended forced liquidation rules in its history because doing so would destroy market credibility permanently. There's a hidden option D that's probably most likely. Controlled demolition. Banks negotiate with Comex and the CFTC for orderly liquidation over 30 days instead of 3. Partial cash settlement, partial physical delivery, partial contract rollovers. The price still explodes to the $150 to $250 range, but it's stretched over a month instead of a week. So here's where we are. 8 banks are trapped in 421 million ounces of short positions they can't cover, in a market with only 47 million ounces available. They have 48 hours to post $891 billion in cash, or begin buying silver that doesn't exist. And unlike 2008, there's no print money and bail them out solution, because you can't print silver. The 72-hour countdown is running. Every option ends in a price explosion. The only question is how fast and how high.
They're very nervous right now for where silver's at, because this is very uncomfortable for them. It's never been this high. So the bullion banks, they specifically have been shorting silver for generations, okay? And they've never had to deal with $60 silver. And we're talking billion-dollar contracts. So when silver suddenly explodes, it's going to be, it's called a silver bullet, the bank killer. There's a reason we used to grow up all the time, hear about the silver bullet, because truly it is a metal that has the ability to destroy financial institutions. What I'm showing you here, Nino, is the 10-day window. Now, this is the secret. There's a 3-day window of error. Why? Because on the winter solstice, the sun sets on the 21st, and it stays the same exact for 3 days. And it's not until the 25th where the day starts getting longer. This is very important. So there's a 3-day window of error that God's not going to reveal the day he's going to strike. We step into Christmas morning to be the greatest Christmas God gives us. He removes evil, and by Christmas Day, we wake up to the greatest Christmas day we could ever imagine. Why? Because God gave us the greatest gift we could ever imagine. He stops these people.
You're saying this Christmas.
This Christmas, if you do the math on it.
If it doesn't happen this Christmas, then next Christmas?
Well, it has to, but the math is not. See, that's where I have to disagree with anybody who's going to challenge that to a degree, because we're watching silver above $60 right now. Prophecy was the year of Jubilee, which we're in right now, happens when silver explodes. It takes out $50. It did it. So it's through 50. It's actually trading at 60 right now. So my point is, that confirms where we're sitting right now.
Where do you see silver going? Where do you think silver goes by the end of the year?
First target is $68 to $70. There's going to be a little challenge there. So we could see this very soon. All I know is that the up cycle is continuing. Regardless of what they do, this is freaking them out. The fact that silver keeps going out, it's a bank killer. God's about to birth something, and the devil doesn't want what God's about to birth. God's about to birth the greatest time in human history. He's about to birth his bride. The Holy Spirit's going to fall upon the earth, and we're stepping into his glory shall fill the earth. So that's the math for the fall of this Babylonian system. This would fulfill Scripture, which would be Daniel 2, verse 34. So while you're watching, we get to watch this happen. And this is Babylon gets the mortal wound. And I'll finish on this, Nino. is scriptures tells us in Isaiah 61, it's the year of the Lord's favor, okay? In the year of the Lord's favor, this is prophecy, silver would go above $50 because in 1980, it was $49 and change. In 2011, it went to $49 and change. So the prophecy was in the year of Jubilee, for the first time in history, silver would go above $50. It did it in October. Well, it did in October, and then the prophecy continued. It would come back, and it would bounce. It would go below 50 just for a short window, and come back up. It went to 54. It dropped to 47, and now, as we speak, it's above 60. This is the line in the sand. They can't let silver break high 60s into 70s because it will destroy the banking institutions. Okay.
Holy cow, man.
So there's going to be a final battle at $68 to $70. And when it goes through that, it's just going to explode like you can't even imagine.
It's just going to not stop. It's just going to keep
going to rip. Yeah.
You better buy your silver right now.
And the way this is supposed to play out, they've got emergency breakers every $3 and every 5 minutes. So this is written in the CME, okay? They wrote this about 9 years ago. And so when the volcano erupts, silver will erupt in a volcanic eruption, a national park that will be contained, but it will mark the explosion of silver and the fall of Babylon, which I believe is going to be this coming Tuesday. And they're going to be trying to control this. And then by Tuesday, we're going to see silver ripping vertical. And here's how it's going to play out. And this is based on the CME. It's going to go $3, breaker. Another $3, breaker.
Yeah.
Another $3, 5-minute breaker. Another $3, 5-minute breaker. So in a matter of 20 minutes, it's going to go $12. And then no more breakers, and it could go $20 to $30 after that in a matter of before even close. So in a single day, you could see a move of silver 12 plus about 20. So that'll be about $30 to $32 plus in a single day, possibly next week. We need an act of God. And that act of God is we're supposed to see, based on these calculations, silver explode like you can't imagine next week, because that would mark we are departing Egypt. Okay. So the present day pharaohs, we're going to leave Egypt next week. So the marker is to watch an explosion on silver next week, and you'll know an act of God had happened.